Yo guys, welcome back. Uh, uh, I don't really have like an intro to this video or anything. Merry Christmas to everyone. I hope everyone's had a good morning. I mean, I am like, my stomach hurts, but hurts in a good way. Okay, but yeah. Hmm. See if there's been any wins. Let's get on to it. Okay. I just swapped out the glue in my glue gun, and yeah, let's just get back to grinding out the flowers, you know. Alright, well, let's carry on. And yeah.
Micro like components. So if you want to change the big picture, you have to change the components of it. In order to iterate the macro, you must iterate the micro. And the easiest example that I can explain here is if you want to win a war, you just have to win the battles. So what is a war? Like a World War II, what is that? Well, it's not really anything. It doesn't really exist. It's just basically the name that we use to label a bunch of battles. And so if you want to win a war, you win the battles, and battles are the micro component of the war. And so it's the same thing. Like, I can't stress this enough. If you want to fix these big things up here, you fix these things here, and by fix these things here, you fix these things here, and to fix these things here, you fix this thing here. You know, you drill down, you get real specific with it. Okay? So for example, the DNA string of your business, or the variable string of your business, are these things, as we know. And this is the macro hypothesis of your level 1 variables. And as an entrepreneur, obviously you want to grow your business and make it better. And so, you know, you're going to iterate the variables. You're going to iterate your hypothesis. And so we take the hypothesis of the macro variables of the business at level 1, and we change the sales thing. So now we've got version 2 of the business, you know. But in order to change the sales variable up here, then we need to change the level 2 variables of the sales variable, which are script, objections, and pre-call. And so, you know, we're going to come in and we're going to do that, and we're going to iterate it. But in order to change one of these variables, we have to change the level 3 variable, which are here. And so let's say we change the pitch. And so by changing the pitch, then we change the script, which is the level 2 variable, and so on and so forth. I've already explained this in enough detail, I think, but you can just read through this real quick if you want to understand it. But this is how we changed from version 1 of the business to version 2 of the business to version 3 of the business, and so on and so forth. Now, it is possible to work on different parts of your micro hypothesis at any given time. So for example, like, you know, if your macro hypothesis of your business, which, you know, once again are these level 1 variables here, If these aren't really working and you're not getting the result you want after a month or two of testing, then maybe you need to change your offer, but you can also change your personal identity or your sales process or your outbound process. You can change all of these things in conjunction to each other. And so I do this all the time in my business where, if I want to make changes, I might be working on my ads and my content and my mindset and my product and my sales team all at the same time. Like you can run multiple experiments at once, but what matters is you're not running multiple experiments in the same place. So if I'm changing something around my sales team, I'm only going to change one thing. I'm not going to try and run multiple experiments in the sales team at the same time, because then I'm going to get confused if I won't be able to determine the cause of the effect, right? But what I can do is I can change like something about my mindset, and then I can change my diet around as well. I can also change the offer and how that works. Whilst I'm changing the offer, I can also change my YouTube style, because these things are all independent and I can, shuffle them accordingly, if that makes sense. Generally speaking, it helps just to do one thing at a time, but at the big level, you can change multiple things at once. So changes in a localized hypothesis must not be interfered with. So for example, I can change my content process and my product at the same time, but I wouldn't change two things about my content process at once. And I'm going to explain why in a second. When we get into the actual process of the scientific method, I'll explain this. So just bear with me, but it should make sense in due course. So iterating towards goal. So the whole point of iteration is to achieve a goal, right? The whole point of changing this thing and making these changes is so you can get towards what you want. And so your business should have an overarching goal, right? And we can talk more about this in the mindset module and finding out what you want, but you should kind of know what you want. You should have a goal. And so for example, $100,000 a month. Now this would be the goal of the business in the macro sense, because thinking in micro and macro also works in terms of goals. And I'm going to explain this to you here. So what we would refer to a goal as is a North Star or Polaris star. So when sailors didn't have navigational equipment, when they didn't have compasses and radars and stuff like that, and they were sailing in sea and trading in the seas, what they would do is they get their bearings by using the North Star. And so that was their sort of, that was the thing that they based all of their decisions around, was like, how do we get to where we want to according to the North Star? And so your macro goal, being your financial goal, is made up of mini micro goals that must all be hit to make it happen. So earlier how I said that to win the war, you just have to win a bunch of battles? Well, if you want to win the war, which is your macro goal, to be victorious in the war, then all you have to do is win the battles. And if you want to win the battles, then all you have to do is win all the skirmishes, right? So the point here is that if you hit all of your micro goals, the macro goal will be hit. So like, for example, let's say that you want to be healthy. And let's say that your goal is to live to 100 years old. Well, living to 100 years old, the way that you do that is by taking care of all of your micro health goals. So for example, it's making sure that you're exercising regularly and you're maintaining a certain weight, and that your bone density is in a certain place, and that your nervous system's in a certain place. And so these big goals, these big aggregates are basically made up of smaller goals that if hit will achieve the goal. So getting to 100K a month is not about getting to 100K a month. It's about doing lots of small things and achieving lots of small little goals that make that happen. So your goal is an outcome of an aggregate of all your micro hypotheses. Your goal doesn't really exist, and neither does your business. Goal and business are words that we use to summarize and sum up the parts that make them. They're effectively collective nouns. So I'm going to give you this visual to help you understand, because this is we're going to get a bit abstract and it can get a bit confusing. So if your goal is to make 100K a month, and that's your version X, what you need to do, then, maybe to get to 100K a month, all you have to do is nail your avatar, get your offer right, get your outbound process right, get your content process right, sales process right. And if you get all of these metrics, and you hit all of these goals and these are individual little components of the business, then you'll hit 100K a month. So let's visualize this. So here's an example, 100K a month business. Now, your avatar. So if you get your avatar to the point where it's 10 pages long and it's 85% accurate, we've hit the avatar goal, right? And your offer. If you have such a good offer that your click-through rate on ads or YouTube videos or cold emails or whatever is 3%, which means that 3% of everyone that sees your offer actually want to book a call, then we consider that a goal. So one of your goals in business is to achieve this click-through rate. Now, by the way, these numbers are arbitrary. I've made them up. I'm not saying this is what you should aim for. We'll talk about what to aim for when we actually get to the specific systems, but that you get the point. For example, the outbound process. Your goal with the outbound process is to get a 5% appointment booking rate, which means if you call 100 people, 5 of them want to talk to you and book a call. Or your content process. Maybe your goal is to get to 100,000 different views per month on your videos. Or maybe your sales process. The goal could be to get to a conversion rate, get your sales skills to a conversion rate of 25%. Or maybe your goal with your product is to sell people into your product and to have a refund rate of less than 5%. Or maybe you have a goal for your mindset and your identity to become a person who's consistent. If you'd hit all of these smaller goals and you did all of these things, 100K a month would naturally manifest. And so you don't chase your big goal. You set it there as your North Star, as the thing that you use to help you orient yourself, in this metaphorical ocean that is business. But if you want to achieve that, it's as simple as achieving all of these small little things, okay? And we achieve those small little things at these micro levels, okay? So if you want your business to be successful, then you need to have a successful offer. And if you want your offer to be successful, you need to have a good outcome. And you fight all of these little battles, and then you win the war, okay? So war, like I've said, is a label used to collect a bunch of battles. And in business, the battles are all of these different little variables. Now, this is the version of the hypothesis required to achieve said micro goal. So VX is basically what I'm referring to there. So sorry, I skipped this part. So you win a war by winning battles. Win enough battles, you win the war. You'll notice how each micro goal here on the right-hand side has this version X. So once again, whilst we have a version X for your overall goal and where you want to be, we have a version X for every small little goal as well. And if you hit the version X and the iterant, the iterative process, if you iterate enough inside of each little component and you get to where you want to be in each little component, then you will manifest the entire thing. Now, I know that this is this is getting repetitive and it might be a little confusing and you might need to watch this section back a couple of times. I'm doing my best to explain a very complicated abstract term. Please bear with me, okay? Like I said, achieving your big goal is as simple as achieving lots of small ones by attacking them one at a time. And by attack, I just mean iterating, testing, and experimenting with new hypotheses. Success is incredibly easy and simple when you compartmentalize your objectives and look at them as small little problems to figure out. Figure them all out, line them up in a hypothesis string, and you will have a successful business. And the hypothesis string, by the way, is just like when you sort of visualize all the variables put together. And you literally iterate your way to success. And the only kicker here is it just takes time. It takes years to get to these things. And you might have heard the phrase before that the only way to eat an elephant is one small chunk at a time. It's the same thing. Like getting to 100K a month is like eating.
Holy hell. What time are we on? 13 minutes? Bro, it took me 13 minutes to do 3 little flipping thingies. But anyway, let me show you guys where I'm at with this. I mean, this is taking a minute to do. And I know it doesn't look like much, but bro, you won't understand how much time and pain in the joints of my fingers have went into this. But yeah. I hope I'm like loud enough. I don't know if I talk too quietly or too loudly, but anyway. So they're all glued now. I've glued all of the little things down. And yeah, I think now it's time to put them all on the little stalks that I have. Oh, I'm gonna need to cut holes. Oh, I need scissors. Hold on, I'll be back. And by the way, I am listening to the videos. Just saying. I know I am working my magic with these flipping paper flowers at the moment, but don't worry, I am paying like half attention. But that's why we're gonna go and watch these all back over after as well. But anyway, let's get into the cutting.
Eating an elephant. Like, to do this thing, you have to break it down. Like, what's everything I need to have in place to get to this point? And then you break those things down, and then you break the things down inside of those things, and you get to the real simple little pieces, and then you just attack these tiny things. Because you can eat an elephant if you're only eating like little bite-sized pieces. It's just going to take you a long time, but you can do it. It's exactly the same thing with building a business. Like, all of these little problems are quite easy to figure out. It's just that there's lots of them, and they take a lot of time, and you need to attack the small things, okay? So measuring experimental outcomes. So the big question then becomes, like, how do you know if your iteration is working? like how do you actually know if a new hypothesis is good or bad? So as I've discussed, a hypothesis is basically a guess. And it's like it's a statement of like a guess where it's like, okay, well, if I do this, then this might happen. But how do you know if a hypothesis works or not? Like, what makes a hypothesis at any level, whether in the macro or the micro, good or bad? Well, as we now know, we have goals at multiple levels. And I want you to start thinking about it like this. So when I use the word goal from now on, the goal is transcending the levels. So it could be the goal of getting to 100K a month, or it could be the goal of getting to a 25% sales conversion rate, right? When you can test at multiple levels, therefore we have goals at multiple levels, and we have KPIs at multiple levels, which are key performance indicators. And this will all become clear as I go through this diagram, okay? So think about it like this, because this diagram can be extended to understand the nature of experiment at all different 3 levels of variables, okay? So we've got level 1, level 2, level 3. If we want to know an experiment's working or not, because we're going to experiment at these different levels, then we can use this diagram, okay? And I know this is getting a little confusing, and this is one of the hardest things for me to explain to you. So please, if you feel confused and it's taking a minute for you to understand, just rewatch the whole video. It's really important you get this, and I appreciate you bearing with me. So here's how it works. So this is how you can measure the effectiveness of an experiment. So we have the goal, and we have what we would refer to as hell, determined by this fire, right? The red arrow refers to regress, and the green arrow refers to progress, and the black line with the version next to it refers to the baseline. So you have where you are right now. So whenever you're conducting an experiment, or whenever you're about to begin a new experiment, you have your baseline. And your baseline is determined by your current hypothesis. So the current variables that you have, okay? Version 1. Then you have where you want to be, which is your goal. And then you have where you don't want to be, which we're going to call hell, which is below your baseline. So, if you bring in a new experiment, and you bring in a new set of variables, and you bring in a new hypothesis, and you test something new, you're bringing in like version 2. And if by introducing version 2, you move away from baseline towards your goal, then we are making progress. But if by introducing version 2, we move away from baseline towards hell, then we are making regression. And so, when you introduce something new to your business, it's either going to bring you closer towards your goal or push you away from where you are right now towards hell. Or it's going to keep you at the same level and keep you the same. So to make this concrete, for example, let's say that, like I said earlier, I find a new piece of information on how to handle objections on a sales call. And let's say that I implement that information into my sales process and I experiment with it for 30 sales calls. And it's quite a big change to my objection handling process. Let's then say that over those 30 sales calls, I make less sales, okay? Because I introduced this new objection handling variable that I found on TikTok like an idiot. And so what's happened by introducing this new variable is I have regressed. I've made less money. I've made less progress. I'm moving away from where I am right now, away from my goal towards hell. So this is important to understand because most of your hypotheses or hypotheses, to use the plural, are going to force regression. Most of the times you're going to be wrong. Pretty much 95 to 99% of the information that you find online or anywhere is going to be wrong. with the exception of programs like this that have been thoroughly thought through and actually tested. Because think about it, if you go on Facebook and find someone doing something and then and you start copying that, how do you know it's going to work? Like, you have to test it, of course, but most information out there is wrong, and most people are wrong about everything all the time, constantly. And so if you're not careful and you start making new variables and introducing tests, you're just going to be moving further and further away from your goal. And so, let's say, for example, that your goal is to make 10K a month, and that your baseline, which is where you are at right now, is 1K a month, and hell could be debt. So, let's say that you're in a job right now and you're making $1,000 a month, and your hypothesis is to start this business, right? And the way I've structured this program is so much in the fact that it's not going to send you into stupid amounts of debt, right? So you can't go to hell. The only way you're going to succeed with this program the only progress you're going to make with this program is progress. You're not going to regress at all. And that's what makes a good product. And so, you have where you are, you have where you want to be, you have where you do not want to be, which is below where you are right now. And every time you introduce a hypothesis, you've got to measure it accordingly. And so version 2, the next hypothesis, is either going to move you towards, away, or stay where you are. Okay. This is how we basically measure the outcome of an experiment. Okay. So anytime you test something or introduce new information, it's going to do one of these 3 things, and you need to be watching it like a hawk to make sure that you're making progress and not regress. Okay. So, let's say that we introduce a new variable to this experiment to create V2, and let's say that we introduce version 2 like this. And, we've now introduced version 2, and by introducing version 2, we've moved slightly closer towards our goal. And so by virtue of progress, which we can visualize here by version 2 bringing us above the baseline, version 2 is better than version 1. So therefore we lock it in and we create a new baseline. And this is how you make progress, is you introduce a new hypothesis, you pop it in. If it makes progress, then you stick to that hypothesis. If it doesn't, then you go back to version 1 or the version before that, and then you continue. And so, here's the thing, right? So, we've gone from version 1 to version 2, and we've increased our baseline towards our goal, but we're still not at our goal. We're still quite far off of our goal. There's still a lot of progress to make here. And so let's say that we introduce version 3, which is a new hypothesis, so we bring in version 3, and we test version 3, but then version 3 was actually worse than version 1. So this happens a lot. Like, just because you're introducing new versions does not mean they're going to work better. Like, new is usually bad, So we would reject the hypothesis of version 3 and go back to version 2, and then we would create a version 4, and then we would try again and again and again. And so, for example, right, let's make this concrete. So let's say that this is the current baseline for how many appointments you get from your cold emails. Okay, cold emails are nice, easy example. So you're getting this many appointments. So the goal is to get 100 appointments a month, and hell is getting no appointments a month. And so right now you're getting like 50 appointments a month, but you're not getting enough, right? So you introduce version 2, and you change your cold email slightly, one of the variables to change that system. And therefore you start booking 60 appointments a month. You've just ever so slightly increased the amount of appointments you're getting, which is perfect, right? But then you think, okay, well, I'm onto something here. I'll change it again. But then by making that change in that month of that change, now you only book 20 appointments. So you need to have the awareness and the cognizance basically to recognize when a change is driving regression as opposed to progression. And so, this is kind of how it works. Like you can map your hypotheses on the trajectory towards your goal. So most hypotheses, most new information, and most new hypotheses and new variants that you introduce will fail. And most of them will drive regression away from the baseline before them. This is the point of an experiment. So now we would know, for example, that cold email number 3 is way worse than cold email number 2, and it's even worse than cold email number 1 was, okay? Because we're below that baseline. And so after doing this for some time, you can start to map the results of your various hypotheses, always setting the baseline at the newest height and testing from there. So, for example, here is an experiment with 12 different variants. And let's say this is a cold email experiment. So we start off with version 1 baseline, where we're booking 50 appointments a month. And we introduce version 2. And version 2 moves us to 60 appointments a month, but still not quite there. Well, version 2 becomes our new baseline. And then we think we'll test version 3, but version 3, as we know, brings us to 20 appointments a month. So we think, okay, shit, we'll go back to version 2, but we're going to run an experiment. So when you're running an experiment, what you're doing is you're still running version 2 at this point. So if something's working, you never stop running it, ever. You just introduce an experiment like separately to it. So if I'm running a cold email campaign that's working, I'm never going to turn that off. If I want to try a new cold email campaign, I'm going to create a new one and run that as a new experiment. In the same way that, if a scientist is trying to measure the growth of a bacteria, he's going to get them in a Petri dish and he's going to put some stuff in a different Petri dish to test the effect of that stuff as opposed to the stuff before it. So what I'm saying is when you've got something that works, never stop doing it. If you want to test it and try something new, then, you run a different experiment. And this is explained in more depth in Easy Grow. This is something that to really grasp and to really understand, like you can get the basics of it like this, but if you really want to become an absolute expert in this thing, it takes like 15 hours of explanation. So we'll get into that later. But anyway, so version 3 is, shit, doesn't work as well, below baseline. So we try version 4, which is also worse than version 2. So then we try version 5, which is actually better than version 2. So our new baseline becomes number 5. And then from version 5, we try version 6, which is way worse than version 4 was and better than version 3 though. So, version 6, it still hasn't got us towards our goal. So we try version 7, which works slightly better. And then version 8, which works the same as version 1. And then version 9. And this is how progress looks, is you iterate, and it's not going to be this like neat little tidy jump towards goal. You're going to go up and down. But what matters is you remember the highest point and you always maintain that as the standard. Like, the people are just sometimes idiots where I've seen this all the time with like people who test things and like they just end up forgetting what works. So like they'll have version 1 which works better than their version 6, but for some reason they're running version 6 even though version 1 worked better. and they're like, oh, but it's version 6 so it must be better. It's like, you're an idiot, like it doesn't work. So you can visualize it like this. Progress is never a straight line. And you always want to, raise that bar, raise that baseline and measure every experiment that comes against it past the previous highest point, okay? Now, in summary, your business is simply one big experiment with a North Star, which is your overall overarching goal, like 100K a month or 10K a month. To achieve the North Star, we must conduct various smaller experiments, because that's how you do it. And these smaller experiments are made up of even smaller experiments. So for example, if the North Star of your business is to make 100K a month, then a goal that you're going to have to achieve to make this happen could be 100 appointments per month. And that's at the outbound cold email level. And a goal that you're going to have to achieve to make this goal happen is getting 10,000 people to open your emails per month. So this is my point, is goals are like, they are fractal insofar as the fact that the big thing needs a little thing to happen and the little thing needs a littler thing to happen. You have to learn to think in macro, micro, micro, okay? And so the variables of the cold email open rate are going to be deliverability, the subject line, the lead sourcing, the email name, the structure, the personalization. If we get all of these little things right, then we're going to get this thing right. And if we get all of these little things right, then we're going to get things at this level right. And if we get all the things at this level right, we're going to get this thing right. This is literally just building a house. Like, you don't build a house, you just lay tons of bricks. And like, building a house is about building lots of different little rooms. And if you get all the rooms built, then you have the house together. Like, these big things, these macro things are just collective names for little components. And, if you're building a kitchen, like, well, now you need to build the sink. And now you need to build the island. Then you need to build the dining table in the kitchen. Then you need to build like the oven. And then to build the oven, you need to build the handle on the oven. And you need to build the grill in the oven. And to build the grill in the oven, you need to build like, the little slats. And like, we build things by building small things. Like that's the whole point of this entire video, is just to explain that one point. And if we get the small things right, the bigger things fall into place. And it's really easy to build the small things. Like, figuring those little small things out are really easy. What's hard is trying to do it all at once and getting confused. But if you can see it in the micro, it's really fucking easy. Now, so this is how it works, right? So we've got the goal at the business level, and we're going to measure our progress towards our goal or regression towards hell at the macro business level, which is basically how much money we're making. And then the business goal is made up of lots of micro goals, and we're going to measure these micro goals, and the variance and the hypotheses of these micro goals in either direction. And then the micro goals are made up of even smaller micro goals, and we're going to measure these in different directions. And so all of these make up this, and all of this makes up this, and that's how it works. Now, I know that this is a hard thing to grasp, and I've tried my best in making it as simple and understandable as possible. What I need you to know is that Easy Grow, specifically for acquisition, goes into absolutely ridiculous detail specifically on this topic. We are scratching the surface on this whole scientific method experimental thing. To give you some context, in Easy Grow, we've got a module called Acquisition Genesis, and I've got, I think, like 7 or 8 videos dedicated purely to better understanding how this idea works. Because you get the basic of it. The basic of it is fine to get, and you can get a couple of clients. You can get you get yourself started with the basics. But if you're serious about building this business thing, and you're serious about getting to that sort of 10K a month, 30K a month, 50K a month, 100K a month, if you want to just get a couple of clients and chill, absolutely fine. But if you want to actually build a business, you need to understand this on a level that is much, 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 much more advanced than this. And so that's what I've kind of done with Easy Grow here is I've got these videos from Acquisition Genesis, and these are all dedicated, like 3 hour long, 3.5 hour long. Like all of these videos are dedicated to expanding on these topics in way more detail, because I can cover it in one video here, and I can give you the high level overview and give you a basic understanding, but this shit goes really deep. Like, for example, in this video here, in Acquisition Genesis, we've got iterative Darwinian acquisition. And this explains how to use the scientific method specifically for one component of client acquisition that you have to understand. And so I'm trying to give you as much as humanly possible in this program, but I don't want to overwhelm you just yet. I want you to get your foundation straight before we get into the deep shit. So I just want you to know that this goes far deeper, and there's far more to know about this than what I've just told you. But what matters is you've got a deep enough understanding to make decisions and become successful. But if you want to get to millionaire level shit, multi-6-figure level shit, that's that sort of laptop lifestyle thing, then you need to know more. So just a little disclaimer, okay? So metrics. So a metric is a term you should be familiar with. It's basically a measurement. And the easiest way for me to explain how metrics work, and once again, there's a 4-hour video and 3.5 hour video in Easy Grow dedicated to explaining metrics, but I'm going to give you the overview, and then you can get into more detail if you want to in Easy Grow. But metrics are basically measurements, okay? So I'm going to give you an easy example and then explain it in business terms. So your body is a system made up of other systems. And the functioning of your body can be measured by one simple metric, which is your heart rate. So the first thing you would do to see if someone's alive is check their pulse. So this is called a primary metric, and in biology it's known as a vital. So how do you know if something's working or not? Well, you have to measure it. Okay? It is impossible to know if something is working or something is functioning properly if you don't have a measurement. So the only way that for us to, well, okay, if you walk into a room and someone has collapsed on the floor, the first thing you're going to do, and the first thing that an emergency services person will ask you to do, is see if they're alive. And the first thing you're going to do is take a measurement. You're going to take a measurement of the metric of their heart rate, because that's the first thing. Is their heart beating? Like, that is the first thing that you check to see if someone's alive or not. And so the same thing is true in business, where the first metric we use to measure if a business is being successful or not is whether or not it's profitable. And we'll get into that in a second. But my point here is that the heart rate is the first thing we measure. It's a primary metric. Now, inside of your body, you have lots of other systems, because the body is, once again, it doesn't really exist. The body is just a term that we use to collectively describe all of the biological systems that make you up, right? And so inside your body, you have lots of systems. You have your skeletal system. And the metric that you would use to measure whether or not your skeletal system is healthy is bone density. So the mineral density of your bones. If you've got a problem with your skeleton or a bone problem, then the first thing the doctor is going to do, or the osteopath is going to do, is measure your bone density. And so metrics are measurements that we can use to assess the effectiveness or function or quality of function of a system. And the nervous system, your heart rate variability, which is the amount of time between heartbeats and how much variation we have there, is a measurement of your nervous system. And your cardiovascular system is measured by stroke volume. Don't ask me what it is, I just found it on Google. Respiratory system is measured by your respiration rate. So, if you go to a doctor and, you've got a problem with your lungs, and, you've got like an issue, pain,
I have food that I'm gonna eat, but I'll stream later. But